Put our palms together. Namo 本师释迦牟尼佛。Namo 本师释迦牟尼佛。Namo 本师释迦牟尼佛。Okay, put our palms down. Good morning, brothers and sisters.
Good morning.
How are you all today? Have you all had your breakfast?
Yes.
Who had the breakfast? Raise your hand. Who had a breakfast? Almost all of you have your breakfast. So, who had the breakfast? Did the mouth have the breakfast, or the stomach have the breakfast? Who had the breakfast? Yeah, today's talk is a pet topic of mine, but in fact it should be a pet topic of all Buddhists. Yeah, the teaching of no self. In recent years, in some of the English translations from the Western order, they would sometimes highlight that perhaps Anatta should be not self and not so much no self. Yeah. But then I'm a monk. What do I care? In the Chinese tradition, it's always been translated as 无我. So literally, if you translate to English, it will be no self. Yeah. So, how many of you are familiar with this teaching of no self or not self, if you will? Huh? That's why you're all here, isn't it? Really? No one is familiar. Okay, how many of you have at least heard Anatta before? Okay. Okay. Yeah, otherwise you have to start from scratch. Then I have to cancel the 1 p.m. talk. So, Anatta is part of the 3 universal characteristics. Yeah. What are the 3? Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Yeah. So, impermanence, no self, suffering, and then no self. If we look at how the Buddha expressed it, it's pretty straightforward, really. He would have a conversation with the monks, with the nuns, with the laymen and laywomen. He would ask them, and oftentimes the sutta would be monks, yeah. And he would ask them, consider this: is form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent. Is form which is impermanent subject to change? Is form which is impermanent and subject to change subject to suffering? Well, this is going to be a short talk. And then he would ask, is form which is impermanent, subject to change, subject to suffering, worthwhile to be considered as mine, me, or myself? Okay, it's not going to be a short talk. And part of this whole process is the tricky part, isn't it? Because the first part, impermanence, is something that we all can appreciate and experience for ourselves. When you were sitting here and waiting for myself to come, did it felt impermanent? Probably didn't feel impermanent. Felt like a long time, isn't it? Time is a very strange thing. When you're going through something that you hope to end, it feels like it's not ending. But when you're going through something that you want to be prolonged, then it feels like it just finished so quickly. Time and impermanence interchangeably, intertwined. So, but in our day-to-day life, do we experience impermanence? We know impermanence. Science tells us. Science, there's this famous statement: nothing is constant except change. Yeah, we don't even need to be a Buddhist to know that. In many ways, when Buddhists cite articles of science and physics to kind of affirm what the Buddha said, In a way, yes, yeah, but the truth is the truth. Yeah, you don't need to be a Buddhist, or for that matter, to be a scientist to see that things change. The trouble is, sometimes it's not so apparent. Take, for example, when we woke up in the morning, and you look into the mirror, were you surprised? Say no. Say no. No. Most of us wouldn't be surprised. Surprised by what? If you wake up in the morning, or if you fall asleep with short hair, and you wake up with long hair, you would be very surprised. You would have absolutely no doubt that sabbe sankhara anicchati, that all formations are impermanent. Unfortunately, when we go to bed with short hair, and this morning when I wake up, I still have short hair. But intellectually, we know that there are some changes. Yeah? But in terms of our perception, hard to detect. Yeah? Almost imperceptible changes. In our gut, we know that there are changes. And sometimes we do see the changes. Like, we look at ourselves in the mirror every day until one day you, oh, and then you start to see the white hair. Yeah, you start to see the lines appear. You start to see how the days and the years have taken toll. Yeah, you wake up one day and your kids are asking you for $50 instead of 50 cents. And then you realize, oh, how many years have passed? Impermanence comes in many forms. One will be the type where you wake up one morning and you see that you are old. Yeah? Another type will be the change that is there, but it's not so easy to see. Yeah? So as much as the first universal characteristic is pretty apparent, at the same time, there are different levels of impermanence which makes it that much harder to see or appreciate. Yeah? So let's hold this for a while, okay? Because we're going to come and revisit all three and then see how that links together. Then that which is impermanent is subject to change, okay? If it's known as being impermanent, it should change. Whether it change or not is a matter of time, not a matter of if. So far so good. Have you ever thought about why that which is impermanent, subject to change, is subject to suffering? This is the interesting part. Why? Huh? Oh, we don't want to change. And then? What happened? Yeah? And we stick to it, but it still changes. So we suffer. So what about if we want it to change and it changed? Like for example, you want to slim down, you go for exercise, and you change. Then what happened? Is that suffering or not suffering? Not suffering. Wilson, for the coming Chakra conference, I think we're going to replace it with the 7th council. And we declare to the world, we have found the antithesis towards the Buddha's teaching, that not all change is suffering. Wait a minute, this tricky monk. But think about it, it's true, isn't it? Yeah? Because if you look at the teachings, the Buddha very clearly defined that, or not defined, he asked the monks, yeah, and they all agreed, and you all agreed just now, yeah? That which is impermanent is subject to change. That which is impermanent and subject to change is suffering. Yeah, is subject to suffering. But then we also just all agreed that when a change occurs according to our wishes, then it's not suffering. So what's going on here? What crazy magic did this monk pull out of his sleeves? Well, many years back, I was writing a a preface, an address for this senior monk to address a group of student monks who is coming to Singapore. And in the address, I thought, not just the rah-rah welcome speech, we've got to throw in some core dharma, to set things in the right direction. So I brought in impermanence and suffering and no self and like everything I can think of, It's like how young cooks just throw everything in. So then when I presented it to the senior monk, he looked at it. He didn't comment on the grammar or expression. He didn't comment on anything except that one thing. And he pointed this out. Are all changes suffering? And at the back of my mind at that point in time, I was like, you're going to disagree with the Buddha? I'm not going to disagree. Are you going to disagree? But he insisted. He said, no, I don't. You go and think about it. So that got me thinking. And after all this, I was like, yeah, why? Why? Yeah, that was not a rhetorical question. It's meant for you to answer. You see, many times in talks, the way talks are done today and the way talks were done in the Buddha's time is a bit different. If you read through the Pali Canon, most of the suttas is actually a dialogue. Yeah, it's a back and forth Q&A. Yeah, the Buddha asking a question and then they answer, and then they further ask another question, and the Buddha may answer or may reply with another question. And the whole point is to get them to think critically, to think, to contemplate, and then to analyze, to discern, and to then realize, not simply to hear, know, and then accept and believe. That's a different route. For better or worse, that's a different route. So why? I have 45 minutes to wait for your answer. Yeah. Yes, huh? So the first instance when you let's say you want to slim down, and then you exercise, and then you slim down. And so, what's your name? Jihong. So Jihong suggests that it's because after that it will change again. So what if you accept that change? Then no suffering. Okay, end of talk. But you're all in that general direction, and that's the one thing that is most interesting. I chanced upon some writing attributed to Ajahn Chah, the most venerable Ajahn Chah, and he was explaining the term anicca, and he said, anicca is not just about impermanence. I was like, really? And it's as though I was having a conversation. No, I wasn't having a conversation. I was just reading the text. But I was thinking to myself, like, really? And I read further. And so the thing that he said was, anicca is not simply about impermanence. It's about the uncertainty of change. Uncertainty of change. Now, at that point of time when I read about it, I thought that was an interesting angle, but I couldn't find any other text or scripture that point to that. I didn't reject it totally. I have no basis to reject it. I thought it kind of, there's something about it. And then years later, I've been teaching the teaching on Emptiness Heart Sutra for the past 10 years. And then gradually I realized, interestingly, Ajahn Chah is from the Theravadan tradition, Thai Forest Monastery tradition. And then the Heart Sutra is from the Chinese Mahayana tradition. But then in the essence of the teaching of emptiness is that all conditioned phenomena depends on conditions. And because it depends on conditions, and when any of the conditions change, then the resultant must change. And so then it dawned on me that anicca is about change, but about how things change not according to our whims and fancy, but according to conditions. Sometimes those conditions happen to match our wishes, sometimes not. And when it matches our wishes, how do we feel? We're happy. And in fact, we think we are in control. When in fact, it's never within our control. It is just within the confines of conditions. Sometimes the conditions would match with our wishes. And when it doesn't match with our wishes, what happens? Dukkha. Yes, dukkha. And perhaps that's the magic. That anicca, change, is actually not by itself. In fact, it's intertwined with anatta. That things change not according to our wishes. The so-called self, I. If we look at the various schools of teachings within Buddhism, there are actually strict definition of the so-called I. And now we'll go into the I. What is I? What is self? What is self? Don't know. Because when we talk about no self, in Buddhism it's very interesting. If you look through the text, instead of going to look for a self, or instead of saying there's no self, the Buddha says, okay, first say what is the self. What is self? Wilson, what is self? What are you?
Some people associate self with a name.
With a name. So for example, Wilson. Yeah? What else? All of us have a name? Yeah? At the same time, this is not Wilson. That's why he's called Wilson. Is there any Wilsonness in him? If there is, then we can pluck out one hair and ask everybody to pluck out your hair, and we'll mix it up, and I'll ask any of you to go and look out for the Wilson hair. Is there any Wilsonness in his body? His DNA? So within the Gattaca DNA chain, the G sequence, is it any different from the G sequence in other people? Actually, no, Yeah. In fact, if there's any Wilsonness in his DNA, if you just pass his DNA tag to a number, and you pass to any scientist who is doing genetic engineering or bioengineering, they'll look at this, oh, come on, don't pass me another Wilson gene again. But he won't. He will just see that this is a sequence of genes. He wouldn't be able to tell that this is Wilson. When he was born, I don't know about Wilson, but some kids, when they are born, they don't have a name yet because the parents couldn't find me to give a name. No, I swear. There was this couple who looked for me to give a name. I was too busy. So until finally I was clearing a message, and then I messaged them back, and they're like, oh, we already given the kid a name. So probably for around 2 to 3 weeks, the kid was nameless. The kid was like, oi. So names are very almost intrinsically tied to our sense of our identity. Yeah, I, self, identity. Yeah, to identify with something and know as me, or I, or mine. In the Chinese tradition, Chinese really like to be brief. So I'm not very Chinese, I'm a Singaporean. Chinese really like to be brief, so they shorten everything. Even this part, mine, me, or myself, they combine some of them together into 2. 我所. Yeah. 我 self. 我所 is again shortened from 我所拥有. So, me and mine. Because mine and myself is both mine. Yeah? But actually myself is a combination of self and mind. But this is more the technical part. Yeah, if you go into Pali Canon, have a swim inside, yeah, make friends. As my late teacher always say, 我们跟佛菩萨做朋友，多去读经藏. Yeah, we make friends with the Buddhas and the enlightened ones. We go and read the suttas. Now, coming back, what is self? Whether you call it a name or an identity, there are some definition of self. Yeah. So, is your body yourself? Huh? Well, just 15 minutes into the talk and nobody knows what is a self already. What is the self? In ancient times, in the Buddha's time, there were those who think perhaps this body is the self. Yeah, in the Buddhist term, in the religious group in the Buddha's time, 2,500-600 years ago, they would call this in general rupa. Yeah, rupa, physicality. Yeah, not kaya. Kaya just body, but rupa, which would include the tables and chairs and everything physical. And again, in the Chinese tradition, we call it 根身器界. So 根身 would be the body with all the senses, yeah, the faculties. And then 器界, the external world, that is described as a qi, as a vessel, the vessel world. Why? Because the external world acts like a vessel to contain all the sentient beings. Yeah, so there are those in the Buddha's time who actually identify with this physical body as the self. Now, not all of them think in this way, because there are those who are, nice idea, but this self of yours will grow old, will fall sick, and when you are sick, it doesn't follow your instructions. Yeah? And then one day you die, and then it decays, get torn apart by wild dogs, or you cremate it and it's gone. So then your self is gone. So it is said that those ascetics in the Buddha's time, including the Brahmins are very interesting. Today they are known as still Brahmins, but under a different label. Yeah, we call them Hindus. But actually the term Hindu is a mispronunciation of the term Hindu. Yeah, I didn't cook this up. One Hindu lady back in 2010, yeah, shared this during a conference. So the Hindus or the Brahmins, they worship. Who do they worship? Brahma, yes. They worship Brahma. And they consider Brahma as the Maha Atman, the great self. And then they have this notion that each and every one of us have a smaller self. Yeah, and their notion is when they die, then the self return to the big self. But if it's not good enough, boom, then you go through reincarnation, and then you try again. And then you try to purify yourself, and then when you die, try to conjoin with the great Atman again. So in that context, when the Buddha left the palace, practiced under Alara Uddaka, found that didn't work, practiced extreme asceticism for 6 years, discarded that as well. And here I must really highlight, a lot of Buddhists wrongly think that, it is through the practice of extreme asceticism that the Buddha attained enlightenment. No. The Buddha very clearly stated that didn't work. That's why he discarded that. Then later on, we all know, yeah, he practiced under the Bodhi tree. Then through the 3 stages of the night, he saw how everything works. And one of the key things was that there was nothing that is permanent. But what happened after that was even more interesting, because then he met all these different cultivators who had all kinds of notions of self. You can go and take a look at I believe, the Brahmajala Sutta. Yeah, the net of views. Yeah, where it outlines 62 different wrong views. And it's all, a huge part of it is a combination of ideas about self. Now, all this were summarized by the masters into 3 main features of self. Are you all ready? Take down notes. I'm going to recite in Chinese first because I learned this part in Chinese. So the 3 features of self. 常恒住, 不变异, 有主宰, yeah, or 主宰性. Yeah, these 3. The first, 常恒住, that self is eternal. Yeah. Number 2, 不变异, doesn't change. Number 3, 有主宰, has control, is autonomous. Yeah. So these 3, in a way, opposes the 3 universal characteristics. Yeah. In a way, not totally, yeah, but it can be linked to them. So, the first is that it's eternal. If we look around in many religions, the concept of soul or Atman or self, they are all talking about the same thing. Yeah. So the Buddha's approach is very interesting. Instead of simply telling people, no self, no self, he would ask people, what is the self? And this was generally the definition. Then he asked people, why don't you show me where that self is? Why don't you go and find it? And in all the various suttas pertaining no self, the question he asked would be what I went through earlier. And he would ask them, do you find anything that is eternal, permanent? No. Do you find anything that is unchanging? No. Yeah. Do you find anything that has self-control, where it's autonomous and independent? You can't find anything like that. Even our body itself. Can you control your body? Say yes. Didn't fall for it this time. Let's raise our right hand. Raise our right hand. Put it down. You see how easy it is for me to control you. Let's raise our left hand. Still easy for me to control you. The truth is, I didn't control you, isn't it? When I say raise your right hand or left hand, it's because you, well, maybe out of respect, out of social contract, whatever, you decided, okay, let's raise it. If I say, try not to raise it, but I just feel it, Edmund, raise your hand. And then Edmund involuntarily, eh? Or then under whose control is the hand? Under me, my control. So on a day-to-day basis, we move about with our body. And so if we really think about it, those ascetics who have the notion that this body is me, it's not all wrong, you know. Or rather, not all that stupid. Not all that silly. Yeah, because, let me ask you, if I were to pinch Wilson, would Edmund feel the pain? He wouldn't feel the pain. Would you care? Oh, tricky question. You better care, say yes. As much as he may care, he will care only if he sees me do it, only if he knows. But he can't feel me pinching him. And so, in a very perceptual manner, our body feels like it is part of us. Yeah? But at the same time, there are moments, sometimes when we are sick, and as much as we want to speak, we don't have the strength to speak. As much as on some days, some of us, when we wake up and we want to get off the bed, and we find that we have sprained our back. Yeah? The body looks like it's still the same body, but when you can't move it, you just can't move it. And when you move it, it requires so much energy and a lot of pain. And not just that, the body itself, while giving us a sense of control, in fact doesn't give us any control at all. Take for example, when you're hungry, can you will your body to not be hungry? We can't. Yeah? We need to do what? Eat something to fill our stomach. But in Buddhism, we go one step further and say, in fact, eating food itself also depends on conditions. That even when you have food, you need the body to be in the right conditions to receive that food. Then you can be full. And so when you are really sick, you cannot even take food to be full. You need to go for IV. Yeah? But beyond body, what else? The Buddha went through the mind. Yeah? So we have the 5 aggregates: form, feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Yeah? Are you familiar with this? The 5 aggregate? Yeah? Panchakanda? Yeah. How many of you are familiar? Raise your hand. More exercise. Oh, only a handful. Huh? How many of you are not familiar? How many of you don't know what I'm talking about? So, now, the funny thing is, when we talk about 5 aggregates, it's just like talking about water. What is water? H2O, right? 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. But when you drink water, cheers, do you think, the hydrogen and oxygen taste very good today? You think in this way? You don't, isn't it? You just think, drink water. When you drink coffee, do you think, oh, the water in the tea or coffee is like this or like that? You just think coffee, tea. In the same way, who or what is giving a talk here? 5 aggregates or Fa Shi or Shifu or Bante or what? What do you see here? Wow. Half an hour into the talk, don't even know what is. yeah, serious. Think simple. What do you see here? Shifu. How many of you see Shifu here? No pressure. Okay, what else do y'all see here? Huh? Form. You see form here. Wow. You see form. How many of you see form here? You really just see form here. Wow. What else do you all see here? What else do you all see here? Sangha. Who said Sangha? What else? We have Shifu, we have form, we have Sangha. What else? What else do you all see here? Teacher. Anyone see a man? Anyone see a Singaporean? Anyone see a human being? You see, all this will be correct. Yeah, I was quite surprised when someone said, "You see form." So when you come to Buddhist fellowship, and honest to heart, when you open the door and you come in, okay, do you actually see form or do you see people? I think most of us see people, isn't it? Yeah? Because if you only see form, this is also form, you know. This is also form. Yeah? And that's part of the problem. Because when we look at the teachings, the Buddha keep talking about forms, feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Whereas in our day-to-day interaction, we don't see form. We see people. And we don't just see people. We see the interactions we had with these people. We see friends. We see not so friend. We see meh. We see all kinds. We see people we like. We see people we don't like. We see our friends. We see our neighbors. We see all kinds. And then sometimes we see the roles that they play. This is my boss. Yeah? This is my colleague. This is my wife. This is my husband. This is my children. We don't just see people even. When you are in the train station and you are with strangers, then you see many people. Yeah? But when you meet individuals, then you see not just people, but you see individuals with all the memories you have with them. And that's perhaps part of the reason why when we dwell into the teachings of no self, it sometimes feels like there's a bit of a disconnect. Because if we just go through the method of cultivating anatta, it's pretty straightforward. The sequence that I've gone through with you all, yeah, asking the questions, that is straight from the text. But not just that. The Buddha would then ask the same about feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And at the end of that sequence, you know what happened? 500 of the monks attained arahanthood. I mean, I'm sure if you do it a few more times, you probably will hit it, right? But unfortunately not. Yeah? And perhaps today I want to just share with you this notion that the 5 aggregates are the underlying substrate, the underlying structure. Yeah? Much like water is H2O. Yeah? Chemically, we know that this is H2O. But perceptually, we don't see H2O. We just see the outcome, which is water. Or for that matter, tea. And for that matter, when cooked with other things, we just see the food. Yeah? And we don't just see the food, we see the food that we like and we don't like. And so we often live at the abstract level of discrimination. Perhaps that's why in many of the different schools, yeah, the initial practice is always to stop the discrimination. Yeah? Not that discrimination is bad, you know. The Buddha was able to discriminate. There are some schools, and strangely from the Chinese Zen school, where it almost think that, oh, the Buddha don't discriminate. Yeah? There's this term, 根本无分别智, the fundamental or foundational non-discriminating wisdom. Yeah. It is supposed to be the wisdom where all enlightened ones would have attained, yeah, for a start. But the enlightened ones do discriminate. The Buddha distinguished between those who are of high faculty and those who are of dull faculty. So for sure he can discriminate. The trouble is wrong discrimination. Yeah? And the next trouble is we are attached to our discrimination. We discriminate wrongly and we still think that it is the right discrimination. When we open our eyes, close your eyes first. And the moment you open your eyes, you may not be looking at me, you may be looking somewhere, and whatever you see, ask yourself, what did you see? Some of you saw Shifu, some of you saw Sangha, some of you saw form, and you will all be right in your own ways, and yet in a way, not quite right. In the temple, there were moments where there was once I was waiting for a class to start. Today, my Sanghati is inside. But there was a day where I was wearing my robes, and because I have a pocket here, I took out my phone, I put it back, I took out a pen and then put it back. And to the 4-5-year-old kid, that was just so amazing. You know, like magic, you know. And at some point, he moved forward and he talked to me, and very casually he just lunged forward and just... His mother must have had a heart attack. What happened? You see, there'll be some volunteers who will feel that, oh, you're so rude to the monk. But actually, he wasn't being rude to a monk. He wasn't, number one, being rude. Number two, he didn't know that I was a monk. Because to the small kid, there's no concept of a monk. And that's why when you guys bring your small little kid or grandchildren, then when some venerables are here, you bring and then you force the kid to kneel down. Pay respect. Yeah, and some of us went through that when we were young. And we're like, and then our parents will say, call Shifu, or call Bante, or call Ajahn. Yeah? And then we'd be confused. This one Bante, this one Ajahn, this one Shifu. All three have the same hairstyle. But then, over time, they start to remember. And after a while, it gets imprinted. And so the next time, until such time when they grow up, and then they see someone that matches that notion of what a Shifu is. And they say, oh, this is Shifu. So in fact, when you see Shifu outside, it's because you have a Shifu inside your mind. When you see Sangha outside, it's because you have an idea of Sangha in your mind. You see form, it's because you have an idea of what form is in your mind. So the next time when someone call you stupid, you must know that the person have had the stupidity in their mind for a long time. But wait, so what? Have you ever asked yourself this question? This is a very powerful question. So what? All the teachings in Buddhism. So what? So what if it's impermanent? So what? So what if it's suffering? Some students even ask me, suffering, lor? It's part of life, ma. Self or no self, who cares? Yeah, so what? And perhaps this question itself is even more pertinent than the question of whether there's self or no self. Or for that matter, another pet topic would be whether this world was created by some bigger self or not. Yeah. So what? So what if there's self? So what if there's no self? Does it matter if we call it self or not self or any name for that matter? In our day-to-day life, in our interaction, think about the last time when we got into some conflict. Yeah? Is it with self involved? Is it with the I involved? Or is it not? Which one is it? With I or without I? But at the same time, who is attending the talk now? It's I again, isn't it? So what's the problem here? So there are so many things related to the I. And the trouble is, how do we relate to this sense of an I? Is our expectation and perception in line with reality? That is ultimately the question. Whatever we call I, whether you call it Wilson or Edmund, I only know their name. I can't remember the rest. So I'm going to keep talking about them. Yeah. As long as your perception and expectation is in line with reality, then you have lesser or no suffering. That's the so what. As long as it's not in line, the more out of line, then the more suffering you get. Today I had wanted you all to do an exercise actually. But then when leaving my residence, the vihara, I realized that they had packed the visualizer away. So I didn't bring the visualizer. Yeah, and I even brought along my writing material today. Sorry, not this. Yeah, I brought my writing material today. But I don't have the visualizer, so you can't see it. So you all need to, write it visualize in your own mind. So I want to just guide you all through a short series of questions, okay? To perhaps cement, not cement will be too strong. To share with you an approach, having said all that we have said, to relook at our life, our existence, and perhaps share a glimpse of what no self is. So if you visualize an A4 page in landscape mode, and then you put your name in the middle, and you ask yourself this simple question: what am I? Okay? Then around it, you would write down all the different answers to this question. Who am I? What am I? It would include perhaps answers like, I'm a father, or I'm a mother. I'm a son, I'm a daughter, I'm a brother or sister, I'm a friend. All the different relations you have with your family and extended families. And then beyond that, for those of us who are studying, then you are also a student. And even for those who are working, sometimes you attend some workshops and you are a student as well. In terms of your professional field, then you are all the different roles that you have played, all the different work that you have done. In terms of your own sports, your hobby, then you may be a cyclist, you may be a swimmer, and so on and so forth. And all this together will define more or less who we are, isn't it? More so, perhaps, dare I say, than the 5 aggregates. But do not doubt for a moment that Shifu is overriding the Buddha's teaching. Because all these roles, ultimately, consists of and comprises the 5 aggregates. Apart from the 5 aggregates, none of these roles can exist. Much like water and H2O. But we drink water, we don't drink H2O. Although water is H2O. So think about it. All these roles together define who we are. But sometimes we focus more on one role than the other. And sometimes our life demands us to switch roles rapidly. A person who is working in the corporate world, sometimes when they are back at home, they may bring along the nuances, the subtle mannerism of work over to home. And unconsciously, not consciously, unconsciously, treat the children like their staff. And the first thing one may ask when we come back is, have you done your homework? Much like we ask our staff, have you done your work? And maybe even sit down and give you KPI. So perhaps one angle to look at no self is not so much that there's nobody out there, but that there's no permanent role that we play. Because even these roles, all these different roles that we play in life, are they intrinsically in us? For those who are father, are you intrinsically a father? Without your child, are you a father? Legally you are, but for all intents and purposes, take Wilson for example, sitting there. At this moment when sitting here, are you a father sitting here? You are? In what way are you a father? Now sitting there? Father is still a father. So is there a difference in the way a father sit and a non-father sit? There has to be a difference. Otherwise, what's the point of having that difference in name? So think about it. You don't have to immediately agree with me, although it'd be nice. But think about it. Sometimes we do feel that way, isn't it? Notice I chose Wilson, not in part because I remember his and Edmund's name, but also because if I had chosen a mother, or mother is mother lah. But even mothers, think about it. Do you have children? Are your children here? So, do you function as a mother now, at this moment? No, isn't it? Yeah? Right now, even for those who came with your child, what is the role, the function you are playing? You're playing the role of a Dharma listener, isn't it? But I've gone to talks before where the mother is still mothering the child, So as a result, they cannot listen to the talk. Yeah? And so, even these roles that we play, father, mother, or for those who are, much younger, if you come alone, then while you are the son or daughter of somebody, at this point in time, you are not playing the role of a son or daughter. Like you are somebody's son. Is your parents still around? They are. Are they here? No. So at this point in time, okay, maybe he still feels I'm playing the role of a son now. Yeah. But are you playing the role of a son now? At this point in time? Listener. Just listener, isn't it? Yeah. And so even as much as Wilson is father and son, he is not father and son at this moment. But if at the moment suddenly his phone buzz and he see that it's his father or mother calling him, immediately his mindset transforms into son. And then when he goes out and answer the call, I bet, well, monks shouldn't bet, but just for argument's sake, I bet he don't speak to me the same way as he speak to his father or mother, nor to his children, isn't it? I hope. Yeah. So all these roles stacked onto us. Whenever there are conditions, with your children as a condition, then the role of father appear. With the conditions of your parents, the role of son appear. And so the challenge is this. Yeah, and this is to answer the why, the so what. So what if it's no self? Yeah, the so what is because of the way we are really, comprising all the different roles. So given the different conditions, then rightly speaking, we should allow and adapt and change into the different roles, get into the different shoes, if you will. But it's not so easy. Because once we are into some roles, we are so used to the role, and we have inertia, Yeah? We have that momentum and inertia. So it becomes hard to switch roles. So one way to look at no self is to realize that because there's no fixed inherent self in any of us, so given different conditions, we can adopt different multitude of roles, or self, if you will, that are transient, that are impermanent, that are temporal, not inherent, not fixed. And if we can do that, then our life will be perhaps less stressful, perhaps no suffering. Can do it or not? Not so easy, huh? Does it make sense? Huh? Does it make sense? Yes or no? I mean, if it doesn't make sense, it's okay. You can just say it doesn't make sense, No, there's this expectation, and Sifu asks, of course, have to say make sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, Dharma talk sometimes don't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, you better say it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, you come here, spend 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and then you go back, don't know, leh? Self, no self. Yeah. I want to invite you all to, after this, get a piece of paper and then do up this map. And it is actually a concentric mind map, where your name in the center and all the rows surrounding it, And then each of these roles outside depends on other factors and sometimes individuals to exist. And so in Buddhism we say our existence, okay, depends on all these conditions, the first round of conditions, to exist. Without which we are just physical body here. And then individually, all these roles in turn depends on a second layer of conditions. Yeah. Do this exercise. And if you have interest to further this exercise, you can join us at Chaka conference. I was told to do a one-line advertisement blurb. How many of you have not signed up for Chaka? Haven't signed up for Chaka. So do sign up. Okay, I think we have some time for Q&A.
Okay, anybody has question for Venerable Chuan Guan? Feel free to raise your hand and I'll pass the microphone to you. Okay.
Yes.
We have one.
Yes. Yes. Well, if we can do that, then perhaps we'll have lesser stress. And our expectations will be in line with reality. And if it's completely in line with reality, then Arahant. There is one part which I kind of sort of like gloss over, which is the question I asked you guys earlier about why is impermanent suffering? Yeah. So, again, it's a series of questions. Something which is impermanent is subject to change. Something that is impermanent and subject to change, is it more likely to conduce towards stability or instability? Stability or instability? Instability. Is instability more conducive for calmness, more conducive for or anxiety? Calmness or anxiety? Anxiety. Is anxiety suffering or no suffering? And then if you throw in the change not according to conditions, then it becomes worse. Yeah? Because even if it's temporarily stable, even that stability is inconstant. Yeah? And uncertain. And that's why it's suffering. But even all this, on Friday, I guided them on 2 sessions of sitting. The first session was Anapanasati and Satipatthana. Second section was a very thorough observation of impermanence. Yeah, the body, the feelings, the mind, and the mental objects. The things we've discussed, is just a concept. It is like bungee jumping. We all know what bungee jumping is. Yeah, controlled suicide. Yeah, everybody know. Yeah, if you don't know, go to YouTube bungee jumping, and you see all kinds of bungee jump. Now there's even the reverse jump. But you can say all you want, you can hear all you want. It's different from doing the actual jump. Yeah. So in the same way, the talk is like the brochure, to give you an idea. You read the sutta, you have discussion, but ultimately it's to repeatedly go and observe this. Observe this until you have no shred of doubt that this is the case. Yeah. Then it becomes internalized. Okay? You have a question?
So we have like people who are stream winning, then there are arahants. Is the realization of anatta, is it different? So there's these differences?
So for stream enterer, Sotapanna and Arahant, the first stage actually removed 3 fetters. So what we call the 3 lower fetters, whereas the Arahant removed the 5 lower fetters and the 5 upper fetters. The 3 lower fetters comprises the first Sakya Ditti, which is identity view. Yeah, this part is just a view, the notion, the concept that you identify this as me and so on and so forth. Yeah, Arahant removes even conceit, which is a more subtle and in-depth version. So the two differ in this way. Both are talking about self. Let me give you an example. When you're crossing the street, and then there's a car that horn at you. Yeah? How do you feel? Bang! Scared, huh? Yeah. At that moment, what do you work as? Yeah. Yeah. So at that moment, social worker got scared? Do you think in this way, social worker got scared? Or how do you feel? I'm scared. So this is one level. Okay, this is the conceit level, the very deep, innate level. Whereas after that, if you go over and you say, hey, why do you horn at me? Then the person say, so what? Who are you? They say, I'm social worker, okay. not you lah. But in Singapore recently, there was one lady who said, you don't know who I am. Yeah. So this is a 2 level. The second level is with conceptual thinking, with discrimination. Yeah. This second level is actually the one that the stream enterer remove. Yeah. So if you go and frighten the stream enterer, he will still be, oh. Yeah. Whereas an Arahant, sky fall down, doesn't mean that he don't know. Sky fall down, don't know, fall down. They will know. Yeah. In fact, they'll probably be even more aware, except that they will be unfazed by it.
So it's more deep, it integrates.
Oh yes, much deeper.
Level of integration.
Yes, yeah. But since you mentioned about stream enterer, I mentioned about the first one, removal of the identity view, Sakya Ditti. The second one, the attachment to the rituals and practices. And then the third, doubt. So these 3 are intertwined actually. Now, because of the removal of doubt here, many Buddhists wrongly think that you cannot doubt. Yeah, anything that the Buddha has said or the monk has said, you cannot doubt. Ayya, you have so much doubt lah. Huh? No wonder you cannot attain enlightenment. By the way, that is wrong. Okay? That is utter nonsense. Why? Because the stream enterer removed doubt, then attain enlightenment. But actually, it's the other way around. Attain the removal of the wrong view, and then doubt disappear. Let me explain, okay? Today we hear about anicca, dukkha, anatta. You go back, you think, discuss, you text Wilson, hey, what, you know? And then after that you have your group discussion, and then you cross the road, you get horn again, oh yeah. And then you go for a Shaka conference, and you have discussion, then after you go for retreat. Then one day you meditate. Then until such point where you come to the observation that indeed whatever you have learned, in Buddhism there's 3 stages of learning. Wen, shi, xiu, san hui. First you hear about the teaching. When you hear and you remember, if you just hear and you forget, then sorry. You hear and you remember, you have knowledge. And that's just knowledge, but very crucial. Many people say, oh, but I need to understand. I say, no, can you remember what I just said? Cannot, then why you bother about understanding? The first thing you need to do when you read a book, attend a talk, is to at least remember what has been said. Whether you understand or not, that is the second part. And nowadays in the school, we are doing it the other way around. Don't have to remember, just try to understand first. What are you going to understand if you cannot even remember what was said? Yeah, so in Buddhism, one, at least know what has been taught, knowledge. Then you go and contemplate to come up with an understanding of what has been heard. But that's not enough. When you cultivate and one day you verify, yeah, you have a glimpse, then at that point in time, when you observe what the Buddha has said, Sabbe Sankara Anicchati, that all conditioned phenomena is impermanent. You observe, indeed it is impermanent. You reflect, you observe, you verify, Sabbe Dhamma Anattati, that all phenomena is in fact no self. You observe for yourself. You have verified what you have heard and understood. And that's why doubt is removed. Doubt is removed in this way, not suppressed. Because you have verified what you have known for so long, and that's why there's so much joy as well. And because you have arrived at this point, you have no more doubt in the Buddha, his teaching, and the fact that there are arahants, there are enlightened ones, because you have become the first stage already. You know that enlightenment is possible. Before that, hey, Shifu, sure or not? And because you practice in this way to arrive at this point, through that sequence that the Buddha called the Noble Eightfold Path, you know that this and this alone, through this sequence, this remove that, this support this, that you attain enlightenment. Then you know that everything else outside of that is peripheral. It's actually a ritual. Yeah, it makes people feel good, feel spiritual, yeah, but it don't necessarily help you attain enlightenment. And so, the first stage of enlightened ones and above, they no longer cling on to rituals, rites. Yeah. So once you have reached that, you are a stream enterer. No more turning back. Yes.
Can we say that no self is changing five khandha? Because your five khandhas are all changing all the time.
Therefore, no self. Yes, we can say that. Because the five aggregates are always changing. And by definition, self is unchanging. So because you cannot find such a thing within the five khandhas, so we say no self. Yes. Yes. Huh? There is self. What I'm saying is there is self.
Otherwise, we won't understand what they're talking.
Oh, what I'm saying is there is.
Otherwise, we won't experience all the conditions with the aggregates. So there is self.
That's what you say. That's not what I say. There is understanding. There is understanding. What is your name? Huh? Bei. So there is understanding happening there, and then we, out of convenience, we agree to call that Bei. So there is Bei understanding conventionally, but still there's no Bei. There is a common notion to somehow still bring in the self here and there. Yeah. I guess it helps us to feel more centered. It helps us to anchor with what we seem to perceive. That I'm sitting here, you are sitting there, you know. We could also look at it another way. The so-called self, or Bei, is really just a label. Otherwise, we have to say, hey, five aggregates.
But then how are we going to experience all the aggregates mentioned if there is no self?
So if there's no self, how can there be an experience itself? Yeah, so this part, there are two ways to dissect. One is conceptually, I help you analyze. Two is you go and meditate and you go and observe. Yeah. In our day-to-day life, it does feel like it is I who is listening. Yeah. I'm sure all of you have meditated before, because just now you all were meditating while waiting. So let me ask you, who was breathing? Who was breathing? Conventionally, we will say, I was breathing, right? But if you were to, okay, I'm sort of giving out the answer. At least in the Zen tradition, sometimes we purposely don't give the answer. And last time I always feel like, why don't give the answer? Just give, ma. But over time, I realized that, yeah, there's a difference between hearing the answer versus finding the answer yourself. So those who want to hear the answer, please plug your ear. I'm going to give the answer. And the answer is, because if you are to go and observe your breath very intimately, whether you attain jhana or not, that's another thing. But if you were to observe very intimately, not just the breath, but the whole mechanism of breathing, then you realize that even as air is sort of breathed in, it is really because of the chest muscles that is pulling upon the rib cage, that is creating a vacuum, and so the lungs, is being forced to expand, and that creates a vacuum that creates this difference in pressure, that air is involuntarily sucked in. That's really what is happening. There's nothing magical about these holes here. There's nobody inside. If you really think about it. So rightly speaking, when you consider who is breathing, there's no one breathing. Because all these parts are just the way it is. Now you can take my word for it, or you can go and observe and see whether that is true. Yeah. And so when we start off doing meditation, many people say, just anapanasati. Don't say just anapanasati. Anapanasati is a very powerful practice. It can lead you to insight. Yeah, it can lead you to insight. Yeah. So in the same way as, even as conventionally we say we breathe, but at the same time, there's no breather. Similarly, there's thinking, but no thinker. No thinker apart from the process of thinking. If you look at Paticca Samuppada, the 12 links, if you look at the 5 aggregates itself, there's no I identified. The 5 aggregates describe all the different mental and physical processes without the need of a person there. And for that matter, which part is the person? Is the body the person? Is the mind? Is the feelings, perception, mental formations, or consciousness? Which is the person? If there's a person apart from thinking, then there should be 6 aggregate. But which of the 6, the number 6 aggregate, where is that? Yeah. So again, one could first read the Brahmajala Sutta, the one on the 62 wrong views, and then familiarize. But even more importantly, go and reflect on that, and lastly, go and observe for yourself. Okay? Conventionally, yes. Conventionally, Bay is there, listening and understanding. Which is correct? All correct? You ask me, all correct? Whichever one can help us overcome suffering is the correct one.
So it's not is a self. Without how do you breathe? There is a self.
Ah,
You know what not self exists?
ah,
This is breathing.
breathing.
There is a self.
So which part of the which?
There is a self.
So where is the self? That's a good question, no? I want you all to think. If there's a self, where is the self? Where? You also don't know, right? And this is exactly the response in the sutta. There was one sutta where I think one Brahmin or ascetic insisted that there's a self. So the Buddha asked a series of questions. Where is it? How does it look like? And so on. And apart from the 5 aggregates, he was not able to describe it, whether in terms of its feature or where is it. So the Buddha said, it is like a young man going into the market and telling everybody, there's a fine young woman, there's this beautiful girl, there's this beautiful girl. Yeah. And then everybody asks, how does she look like? I don't know. Where is she? I don't know. Then the Buddha said, then it's as good as there being no such a beautiful lady. Yeah. So instead of me telling you, no self, go and find the self. Okay? Text me when you find, okay? Yes, question.
Okay, so thanks for the talk. I have this question about, we always say we have to do more good, practice more,
Yes.
to have a better next life.
A better next life.
So my question is what is going to the next life actually, if there's not us that going to the next life?
Very good question. So, if no self, then how does the karma transfer over? Very interestingly, actually, if you look at the Pali Canon, this question wasn't really asked nor answered. But after the Buddha has passed away, this question became more and more prominent. And at some point, there were different schools that came up to offer an answer. One of the school was Yogacara school, of which my lineage is trained in that. And so we say, still no self. But what is transferred is the karmic imprints. In modern times, there's this analogy that is often described, a series of candles. A series of candles pass off its heat, lighting the next candle. But yet, the second flame is not the first flame. While it's not the first flame, you cannot say that they are disconnected as well, because it was induced by the first flame. Now that's a common one that has been around for a long time. Let me share with you analogy 2.0. All of us have what we call a smartphone, isn't it? And if you are using an Android phone, you would probably sync up with Google account. Yeah? And then what if you lost your phone? Go online, deactivate the phone. Okay, please. Then you buy a new phone. The moment you buy a new phone, you log in. What happened? Everything is synced. And then it's as though your phone, didn't change. Yeah, but maybe you have changed the model, so it looks different. But certain features of it will surface again. Yeah, I would say that this may not be the most perfect analogy, but it kind of describes how our karmic imprints is like the profile, that is stored somewhere. In the Yogacara school, we say it's stored in this storage consciousness, alaya consciousness, alaya vijnana. And of course, sometimes answers give more questions, because after that people ask, so where is this alaya consciousness? Perhaps that's why in the Buddha's time this was never addressed. Because regardless of how it's stored, the perceived effect is that there is this continuum. There's this continuum. I would go further to say, without talking about next life, how about this life? How about this life? Any time we talk about past life and future life, there's a bigger question, which is, we cannot remember our past life, most of us anyway. right? How many of you are curious about your past life? Raise your hand. Oh, no. Nobody is curious. I was going to tell you about your past life, but I guess we'll take a rain check. No, I can't tell you your past life. Don't get your hopes high. When people talk about future life, past life, and stuff like that, I would also ask them a question. Do you all remember what you ate last Wednesday morning? How many of you can remember? What do you eat? You didn't eat. That's why you remember. So far, in all the years I asked this question, those who remember usually don't cook themselves, or they don't prepare their own food, and usually are kids, because the mother always prepares the same food. But there's a difference between knowing by inferring. It means because my mother always prepared the same food, so Wednesday I should be eating the same food. That is called inferring. Yeah, it is not remembering. So most of us cannot even remember last Wednesday, much less last year. Yeah, and as much as we cannot remember last year or last Wednesday, the food we ate has partly become part of us. And yet, this is not the same as the you on Wednesday. And yet, this is still affected by that on Wednesday. No self is a very intriguing teaching, and I must say, is a unique teaching of Buddhism. Yeah, no self is linked to another teaching about emptiness. Yeah, but in Buddhist fellowship is much better. It's okay. There are some centers if I even mention emptiness, whoa, don't come to my Theravada center to talk about emptiness. Yeah, but in fact, if you look at Pali Canon, emptiness is mentioned. And I'm not even talking about the Mahasunyata and Chula Sunyata Sutta. These two sutta explicitly has a term emptiness. Yeah, but I'm not even talking about these two. There are others where the Buddha explicitly highlighted the way things depend on conditions, and apart from conditions, that thing don't exist. This is dependent arising nature of things and emptiness. Yeah, emptiness, empty of inherent nature. And this is related, a superset of no self. No self is just about the self having no inherent nature. Yeah. I think.
So probably we just take one last question if you want the time.
One last question.
So coming back to Mr. Bay's question.
Yes.
About the no self and who am I and all that.
Yes.
But I'm just thinking. I mean, let's say, would the self be the possessor? In the sense that, let's say, when we do meditate, we're told, we were guided that this is these are our lungs, these are all our body parts, and even our mind. And the fact that there is the observer who observes the mind, does it not imply that that observer is actually consciousness? Which, yeah, I don't know. I mean, is the self consciousness the observer of all that's happening in the physical and even in the mental realm?
So this is one of the if I can use the word hypothesis that has surfaced in the years about what ultimately is observing. So consciousness is one of the key candidates. But consider this. If consciousness is self, then from moment to moment, let's take the eye consciousness for example. From moment to moment, eye consciousness is changing. So if it's changing, then the first moment and the second moment is not the same by definition of change. Then if it's not the same, if you say that consciousness one is self, then consciousness too is a different self.
But it's still the same observer. I mean,
So this is basically the paradox of Singapore River. We still call it Singapore River, but it's a very different river. There's an English saying, you can't step into the same river twice. And this is basically the issue here. When we call something the same name, and it seems to be linked, we tend to have this innate feeling that it's the same thing. But it is, by all definitions of it, not the same thing. First instance to the next instance, third instance, they are all different. If they are all different, rightly, we cannot say that they are same. By definition. Agree? Usually I'll be having my visualizer and I'll be writing C1, C2, and C3.
I get that part as far as it pertains to the physical world.
No. Consciousness.
It's just there.
Huh? Okay. Wait. This is just the first level, eye consciousness, right? So then consider, when we are sleeping without dreams, there's a complete absence of consciousness. So then where is the self? Yes, that I have this second part too. In case the first part doesn't work for her.
Okay, thank you very much, Venerable Chuan Guan, for your excellent Dhamma talk to every one of us. Shall we say sadhu 3 times, rejoicing in this?
Sadhu, 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 sadhu.